Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Sunday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, April 25th, and I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. We're on for half an hour. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And, I've got my chat room open if anybody wants to sit in there, if anybody's up and I just feeling like coming over and sitting in the chat room. That's great. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And this week we're actually going to talk about domestic violence and abuse. And it sort of ties in where we left off with family violence and abuse, right? So domestic violence and abuse is, it's such a huge, huge issue. It's an epidemic, really. And it's all around the world, not just North America and, Canada and the Western Europe. We're talking. This is something that's happening all around the world. It has been really forever, and it's a real crime. Actually, abuse is a crime. It's against the law, and it should be punishable by the law. And unfortunately, so often it's just not reported. And we see so many reports in the paper and on the news of people losing their lives in domestic violence situations and assaults and stuff. And it's just horrible. It's so sad and it's so wrong. And this is it's really an epidemic. And really, people shouldn't have to live in fear, right? People shouldn't have to live in fear, especially of their loved ones and their family members and their husbands and wives and parents and whatnot, right? So abuse, it just hurts, and it really affects us all. And so that's why I wanted to cover this topic, and we're going to get right into it here in a minute. This is not a professional show. I don't have any professional certificates regarding in counseling or therapy or anything like that. I'm just a person who does my own Blog Talk Radio show, just because I really feel that child abuse and human rights abuses are just not talked about enough. And there are lots of voices out there, thank God. And I just want to be one more to add my voice to theirs. And the more people that get involved and actually start speaking up and speaking out against abuse of all kinds, the more we're apt to see something done with the laws and something done, where the funding will go, right? The funding will only go where people direct it to go, and that's where your lawmakers will direct it. And so it's up to us, really, to make this happen. And if everybody gets involved, it will certainly change things. And so that's what I thought. I'm in between courses at MRU. I'm still studying. I study all the time regarding child rights, human rights, and women's rights. We're talking children's rights, which is the right to live, the right to shelter, protection, especially protection, right, from harm and abuse, right. Same goes for women, right, and women have the right to life, to protection, to safety, to food, to shelter, to all those things, right, to government, just like a child, and men have rights too, right. So I mean, if we don't stand up for those rights, they often get overlooked, and people just don't, they're just not protected, and they're not living the life that they should be, right? So that's why I thought, I'll just do this show and bring out as much information as I can to people who are interested in child rights and child abuse issues and human rights and human rights abuse issues, right? So, I'm not a professional, and you have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive, and if you're sensitive to the topics of abuse, then please turn the show off, because I cover everything regarding, child abuse, child sexual abuse, domestic violence, domestic abuse, you name it, I cover it. So, if you're sensitive to the subject of abuse, then turn the show off and listen at your own discretion, please. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I fight for child rights and stand up for children, and online safety is a huge issue. Your life, online, you are in danger. If you are talking to people that you don't know and meeting people that you don't know that you met online, your life could be in danger. So you want to let people know, what you're doing online, whether it's your parents, if you have a parent who cares, which I really hope that you do, or someone in the family, an older sibling maybe, or someone with a good head on their shoulders, teacher, counselor, guidance counselor at school, or a coach or mentor, someone who can listen and check out what you're doing online, just to make sure it's safe, and it's just something that you should be listening to, because there are a lot of really, psychotic child sexual predators out there, and they will do whatever they can to get a hold of you. So you want to make sure that you keep yourself safe, and you want to pass that on to your friends, because all you have to do is look in the paper today and tomorrow probably, and you will see that there will be reports, or look online, to look at the news online, and you will see that there will be children that will meet people that they met online, and they will lose their lives, or if they don't lose their lives will be ruined from being assaulted and victimized by a child sexual predator. So that's why I'm telling you, if you're under the age of 18, I don't know where the players are nowadays and who's listening, you want to make sure you have someone listen to this show and actually check out what you are doing online and who you're talking to online, because it could be a child sexual predator. There's, if you want to check out a good website on that, the FBI has an awesome website on online safety for children and for adults as well, right? And they have all kinds of statistics there, and I think the statistic that was on the website was 750 million child sexual predators out there trying to get a hold of people online, and especially children, because they're child sexual predators, right? So keep yourself safe. Let someone know what you're doing online. Don't give out any personal information. Never use your real name, and don't meet anyone outside, outside someplace, after school or whatever, that you meet online, because they could say they're 12 years old just like you, or 15 years old, and they'll turn out to be an older adult child sexual predator, and they can get a hold of you, and you could lose your life. So keep yourself safe at all times, and make sure that you study up on how to keep yourself safe online just by going to some of these like KidSafe websites that promote online safety for children, and get that information, okay? So we're going to get started here. Helpguide.org, Understand, Prevent, and Resolve Life's Challenges. It's a trusted nonprofit resource. HelpGuide is an awesome resource for all kinds of information regarding really just life's issues, right? There's all kinds of stuff on there regarding child abuse, all kinds of stuff on there regarding drug abuse and addiction, mental disorders, stress and coping. I mean, you name it, it's on there. And you can go through that website and just pick out like whatever topics interest you, and there's so much good information there. And I got this information about domestic violence and abuse from helpguide.org, and there's lots of websites out there with lots of really good information on domestic violence and abuse. There's all kinds of safety plans out there. How can I be safe? What can I do to get a safety plan? And the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the NCADV, is another really extremely good website regarding domestic abuse, right, and violence. And there's just so much good information out there. So just start looking around and type it into your browser, domestic violence and abuse, and you can bring up all kinds of great information. If you're in an abusive relationship and you're suffering from domestic violence and abuse, whether you're a man or a woman, really, first of all, you have to make sure that you keep yourself safe and that you develop a safety plan. It's so important, because you could save your life. We don't want to hear any more reports about people being killed at the hands of an abusive partner, whether it's a male or a female, right? It's just not right. It's horrible, and every time I see the reports in the paper and on the news, it upsets me, because I grew up in a home that was full of domestic violence and abuse, and my other siblings, we all kept telling my mom just to leave, or even if she didn't want to take us, right, she could just go, and especially the older children would tell her that, right, and or they would tell her to get my dad to leave and make him leave, and let something, right, so that she could have a good life, right, but she never would. And so I grew up in a home full of domestic violence and abuse, and as in turn, we were abused as children, because the abuse just escalated down to us, right? So everyone was just abusing everyone in our home, and some of the siblings obviously were not abusing each other. But the thing is it was the parents always taking their frustration and anger out on us, and then in turn continuing to batter each other and abuse each other, So domestic violence sits really heavy with me, and it's really sad and unfortunate when people will not get help. I watched my mother suffer her whole entire life and would not get help, and it's very frustrating when people will not, for some reason, they don't think they either deserve the help or they don't want the help that's going to be given to them, because that help might not be exactly what they want. And I hear a lot of people say, well, it might be better just to stay here, because where am I going to end up, in a shelter or whatever. Well, losing your life is not better. Losing your children's lives is not better. It's not a better option. Things can get better. It takes time. Nothing happens overnight, except for people can be killed overnight. So, it's better to save your life and have the opportunity to have a good life than to stay in a situation where your life is being threatened and lose your life. And I just know too many survivors of domestic violence and abuse who are survivors. They left, they got out because their lives were being threatened, and I'm so thankful because they're still here today. And had they stayed, they probably wouldn't be. And so I just have to say just one word, that if you think your life is in danger and you feel threatened, your life is threatened, you have to get out. You have to make the right decision. And also, if your children are being abused, then you owe it to them to get them to safety and to get them to a safe place so they can have a good life, because they're counting on you. And so, you can't just slough it off and say, oh, well, it's not my fault because I'm not the one abusing them. Well, if you don't do something about it, you're just as guilty as the person who's doing the abusing, because actually by law, if you know a child's being abused, you have to report it. So, honestly, people, everybody's got to wake up and smell the coffee. You have to protect your children, and you have to protect yourself. So you want to make sure that if your life is being threatened, that you get help and get out and get some help, right? And because living somewhere for a while in a shelter or something is way better than ending up in a funeral parlor. And you know what I mean? It's just way better, because eventually you can go on to have a great life, because I know too many survivors have done it. And it's hard. Well, of course it's hard, It's just as hard for these children that are being removed from the homes and put into foster care. But at least they have a chance at a good life instead of living a life where, they're just daily abuse and where their lives will possibly be ended by a parent or a caregiver who's going to kill them. Eventually the abuse would just kill them, right? My parents, my mom especially was really my abuser, and there was a couple of times where she actually could have killed me. One more blow to my head would have just done it. She was a violent woman and very vicious, and so, but we didn't get out of the home. But these little kids, toddlers, 4 years old, 2 years old, they're being killed every day and every night by parents and caregivers who just cannot control themselves and kill them. So, they don't have a choice. They're not adults. They don't have a choice to make a phone call or just walk out the door. But as an adult, you do, right? And so you have to make the right choice for yourself. It's so important, right? So we're going to get right on here. Domestic violence and abuse, signs of abuse and abusive relationships. Domestic violence and abuse can happen to anyone, yet the problem is often overlooked, excused, or denied. This is especially true when the abuse is psychological rather than physical. Emotional abuse is often minimized, yet it can leave deep and lasting scars. Noticing and acknowledging the warning signs and symptoms of domestic violence and abuse is the first step to ending it. No one should live in fear of the person they love. If you recognize yourself or someone you know in the following warning signs and descriptions of abuse, don't hesitate to reach out. There is help available. Understanding domestic violence and abuse. This is the next part of this article. I'm just reading right from the page here. Domestic abuse, also known as spousal abuse, occurs when one person in an intimate relationship or marriage tries to dominate and control the other person. Domestic abuse that includes physical violence is called domestic violence. Domestic violence and abuse are used for one purpose, and one purpose only, to gain and maintain total control over you. An abuser doesn't play fair. Abusers use fear, guilt, shame, and intimidation to wear you down and keep you under their thumb. Your abuser may also threaten you, hurt you, or hurt those around you. Domestic violence and abuse does not discriminate. It happens among heterosexual couples and in same-sex partnerships. It occurs with all age ranges, ethnic backgrounds, and financial levels. And while women are more commonly victimized, men are also abused, especially verbally and emotionally. And, that's just it, right? It's just all about control. And it's about making someone, live underneath out of their thumb, right? And so they take everything away from you, right? Including your dignity and your sense of self-worth and your self-esteem and everything else, right? So even if they are physically battering you, the real damage is done psychologically and emotionally, because they basically kill you as a person inside, right? And that's what happened in my family. My parents, especially my dad, had really killed my mom's spirit, and she in turn killed mine. And some of the siblings were not affected as much, but my mom had total kind of control over me. I was the last sibling in the house. I was the last child born. Everyone else was always out running around because, of course, there was a lot of violence in the home and nobody really wanted to stay home. And so my mom was there in a manic depressive state, also a state of uncontrollable anger. And as her life was being sucked out of her, she basically did the same to me. And so I suffered right along with her. And then, of course, my dad was also very, really mostly psychologically abusive, as well as some physical abuse so towards me. So this is really sad. This is what's happening out there, and really it's sad that people don't get help when they should. There was an intervention done when I was a toddler, and my brother had reported abuse because he went to school in a turtleneck in the middle of the summer in the desert. We lived in the desert, and he had bruises and stuff on his face, and his teacher noticed, so she took him to the nurse, and they of course asked him what was going on and checked him out and everything, and he said, well, I'm afraid to go home. I'm afraid of my father, right? And because my dad had beaten him up. And so the Child Protective Services stepped in, right? But they didn't remove us from the home, but they did court order. My parents were supposed to go to counseling, right? And for domestic violence, for everything else, right? Child abuse issues, they were told that if they didn't go to counseling, they were going to lose us. Well, my mom pleaded and begged, don't take my children and stuff. This is what I heard anyway. I was just a really young baby at the time, right? But they went to 2 counseling sessions, and that was it. And then we left the country a few years later, so it was a very short period of time there. Within about 3 years, that my parents, we left the country, kind of got out of the sight, out from underneath the Child Protective Services, and then we moved back later. So, this is what can happen to people, and they continue on this abusive cycle, right? And they continue on to destroy each other's lives. And when you're talking about domestic abuse and violence, I mean, we're not just talking. It's not just words. We're talking. It's a living nightmare. It's a living hell to live in around people who are violent and destructive, right? Because you never know when the time bomb's going to go off. You know what I mean? You just never know what's going to set somebody off in that situation, and it might not be anything that you've done, but it just might be the abuser who's had something go wrong in their day, and then they got to come home and take it out on you. And it was just a continual cycle of abuse, and it just went on and on and on and on. And it's unfortunate, right? Because there is help for people if they will reach out and get it. And of course, now I'm learning this 40 years later, but that's okay, because better late than never, right? That's what I say. So, it's really, really sad that that people do these things to each other, and especially a partner. When you enter into a partnership with someone, whether it's a marriage or just boyfriend girlfriend type thing, when you get together with someone, that they're supposed to treat you with love and kindness and respect and dignity, and put you kind of before themselves, right? But it's really sad when you see people completely destroy their partner, their wife or their husband or their girlfriend, right, or boyfriend. It's so sad to watch somebody do that. And the cases of domestic violence are it's outrageous how much domestic violence is going on out there. And the hate that is in people's hearts is just unreal. The hatred that was in my mom's and dad's hearts for each other and for their children was so thick, you could feel it. It was such a hatred, well, my mom would actually tell everybody she hated everybody, but the thing is my dad didn't tell anybody. He just showed us how much he hated us by treating my mother the way that he did, and then treating my siblings the way that he did, and myself, right? So, it's really sad that people just can't get rid of that. Those problems that are in their lives, whether it's emotional problems, mental problems. My dad's borderline schizophrenic, as well as probably a little bit of depression as well. It's mental issues, right? My mom was manic depressive, but she was abused as a child horrifically by my grandmother, who was a horrible woman. And today I have really no love in my heart for her except for the love that God commands. But the thing is she ruined my mom's life and her family's life, and then my mom turned around and did the same thing to us, which is unfortunate because she knew what it was like to be abused as a child, and she went on to go ahead and pass that on, especially to me. So unfortunately, that's the way it goes with abuse, right? People don't sometimes break the cycle of abuse, right? And they just continue it on because they don't get help and they don't reach out, right? That's why it's so important for anyone who's been in an abusive relationship whether it's a marriage or whether you're abused as a child or whatever, you have to make sure that you don't pass that cycle on to your family. If you have a family and you end up with children and stuff later in life, you don't want to pass that on to them, right? You want to stop that cycle, because that's really about the only way we're going to stop child abuse, is to break the cycle and learn how to cope properly. Instead of lashing out and hurting our children or our partners, there's ways to cope. We don't have to hurt other people when we're feeling down. We can go get help. There's lots of help out there for people with problems like that, and there's lots of help for people who are having a hard time coping in any area of their life, So that's the thing. Instead of lashing out and trashing on your family and destroying your family, why not just reach out and get some help? But too many people don't think that they need help, and they don't realize that what they're doing, it's just ignorance, really. It's a lack of education, and there's just something wrong with their hearts, because I don't know how anybody could do what they do, especially to these young children, these babies, 4 years old. I don't know how a person could do what they do to these children. If you look in the reports in the paper, 4-year-old children being raped by their fathers and stuff. How can that happen, and why, and how that happens? That, to me, that's just there's something wrong with that person's brain, or something wrong with that person's heart. They're either extremely evil, or they are extremely sick, and they need they obviously need medical care, like some sort of mental they need psychotherapy or something. I don't know, but all I know is that how can you do that to a child? And just reports in the paper the other day, just even yesterday, of 22-month-old babies being beaten and killed by their parents. And how can you do that? I mean, how can you possibly take that much rage to kill your child like that? And it's just sick, and it's sad, and it's wrong, and it starts with us, right? It starts in our homes, and that's where this stuff is taking place mainly, people's homes. And why in these families has the situation gotten to that point where there's no communication? The parents are abusing each other and abusing the children. Well, I mean, I grew up in that, so I completely understand why, because they won't get help, and they don't think there's anything wrong with them. My dad actually thought there was nothing wrong with the way he behaved, and he still does today. He thinks it was perfectly okay for him to berate and batter his wife and beat on his children. He thinks that was perfectly fine. And, he thinks he's a great man. But my mom actually would never, ever admit that she was wrong and abused me or any of us siblings. She actually would not take responsibility for it at all. So, see, when people refuse to take responsibility for their actions, it allows them to not take on that guilt, right? It allows them to just think in their own minds that what they did was justifiable. But abuse is not justifiable. You can't justify abuse. You just can't. It's wrong. It's against the law, thank God. And now we have laws in place that it's against the law. And actually it should be against, society's way of thinking. And no one should tolerate abuse of any kind. And that's why I say, especially with domestic violence issues, if there's children involved, you have to make sure that you're looking out for those children, because it's your responsibility. So even if you're not the abuser, you still have to get your children to safety and allow them to have a good life. They were brought into this world. They didn't come in by themselves, so they need help to get where they're going, which is adulthood. And if you just let them to continue on to see the violence and see the abuse, even if they're not being physically abused, the damage it will do to them emotionally and psychologically will be far worse than any physical abuse that they could ever suffer, except for maybe being killed or maimed or something. But the thing is emotionally and psychologically, they will probably pass that on to their children and to their partners, because that's how the abuse cycle works. People, once they grow up around abuse, and especially domestic violence and family violence and whatnot, often take that with them and incorporate that into their lives, unless they realize it's wrong, unless they actually say, no, that was wrong, I didn't want to see my mother being treated that way, and so I'm not going to treat my family that way. Or if they say, oh, it was wrong, I don't want to see my dad I didn't like to see my dad being treated the way he was by my mother, and so I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm going to be good to my family, right? Well, then abuse will stop once people start realizing that it's wrong. It's so extremely wrong to abuse another person, whether it's someone in your family or not someone in your family. So, and it's against the law. So people need to start waking up and realizing this is happening all over the place. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys, probably a little bit more than that, but the statistics, that's what it's showing. Mainly 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be abused before the age of 18, whether it's sexually or even physically, right? So, there's lots of statistics out there, but, because of the fact that not all abuse is reported, they don't really know. They're just going by what's reported. So that's too many, right? And I knew lots and lots of people when I was growing up who had domestic violence issues, and outside of my, like in my friends' circle, right? My friends' parents and stuff, and a lot of my friends were abused children as well. And so, it's been my whole life I've been dealing with this. But the thing is it's really sad that people just think it's okay that they did what they did. It's very frustrating. Like 2 of my brothers are in their graves right now because they could not cope with the abuse. The one that reported the abuse, my brother, who reported the abuse at school and said he was afraid to go home, he committed suicide at the age of 33. He was a drug addict, and he was having such a hard time. He never really ever was right because of the abuse and the mental, psychological damage as well as the physical damage that was done to him. He couldn't cope with it, and at the age of 33 took his life. And another brother of mine is died of a drug overdose at the age of 43, almost 44, and this was a few years back. And he did the same thing. He was just so messed up from the abuse in the home. And people would say, "Well, how come you made it?" To me, and I would say probably just because I had a few friends, families, kind of step in for me and show me how to find love in my heart, find peace in my heart, and how to not blame myself for when it happened, and to realize that abuse is wrong and that I didn't deserve to be treated that way. Because had they not stepped in and told me that, no one else would have, because there wasn't one person in the family out of 7 siblings and my sister's husband and their family and whatnot. And my parents had lots of friends too, even though the abuse was going on, they had lots of family friends that would come over and support them. And of course they didn't support the children. They didn't care what was happening to us, but they were very supportive of my parents. Well, if you want to know why, it's because my parents were very manipulative, and abusers are very manipulative. They will manipulate everybody around them because that's how they control the whole thing, right? So, they had everybody just believing that, everybody felt sorry for my mom, of course, and, nobody cared about the kids. And then eventually they started to like my dad too, because he's very manipulative as well. He's, borderline schizophrenic and everything else. So, this is what happens, right? People generally will side with the abuser because the abuser is very manipulative. And so it's unfortunate. So yeah, nobody told me that the abuse that was happening to me or in my home was wrong, and except for this family really that stepped in when I was 13 and a half and finally told me, hey, no, it's wrong, and you don't deserve to be treated that way. Your mother shouldn't be allowing herself to be treated that way, and your mother shouldn't be treating you that way. Because my mother had beaten me up really bad that one day, and I actually went to their house because my head was cracked, and I was thrown out of the house actually. And so this is the thing, right? Domestic violence, it's huge. It's a real problem, and you have to get yourself to safety. So we're just starting this topic here, and we're going to continue on with, we'll try to find some other information too. But this article, we're going to finish this article because it's so good. Recognizing abuse is the first step to getting help. There's an abuse, there's a power and control wheel on there. Regarding violent and abusive behavior is the abuser's choice. Dominance, humiliation, isolation. They will isolate you. They will threaten you, intimidate you, denial and blame. They will not take the blame. That was my parents all over again. So I know exactly firsthand what this is all about. And so we're going to continue talking about this all week, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know. We'll see. But as long as we can keep coming up with some really good information, then we will. So we've got about a minute left. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I am so happy to be, let me tell you. And if we can help you with anything, please get a hold of us. Check our website out at http://dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. And we have Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on blogtalkradio.com, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. We're going to be on starting the first week in May. We're going to be on Monday through Friday every day. And there's going to be different hosts, and the regional directors for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children are going to be hosting these blog talk radio shows, and there's going to be some guests and all kinds of good stuff on there. And I hope you'll join us Tuesday night. We're going to be on Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Donna Shear, the president and best-selling author Donna Shear, is hosting that show, and I'll be co-hosting. I hope you can join us Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday, the 27th of April, for that show. So everybody have a great day. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. And if you are in danger or your life is in danger, call 911. Don't even think about it. If your life is in danger, you get help. You call 911 and you get some help. And if your children are in danger and their lives are in danger, call 911 because they're counting on you to protect them. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Take care, okay?